everyone, and welcome back. Do you sometimes feel as though you are working so hard, but the quality of your work doesn't seem to change? Do you feel like you're just spinning your wheels and going nowhere? You keep trying, and you get the same results. While there is some truth to the idea that time in equals results, it's not the whole picture. So in today's episode, I'm going to share with you my tips for improving fast. And my first piece of advice is not just useful for art, but for basically everything in life. And that is to work smart, not hard. Let's say you're working in your sketchbook and your goal is to improve as fast as you can. So you decide that you're going to try and fill that sketchbook as fast as you can, because more drawings equals more practice, and more practice means more improvement, right? Well, not really. Imagine that you're drawing hands, and the hand doesn't look right. So you try again, and that one doesn't look right. Maybe you have a tendency to make the fingers too long, or maybe you're not really getting how the fingers bend in 3D space. And you fill a sketchbook making those mistakes again and again and again. You're not practicing how to draw hands. You're practicing how to draw hands wrong. And there's a big difference between those two things, because if you're using your time ineffectively, just beating your head against the wall and hoping that hard work is going to get you to the finish line, you're just making a big mistake, because you could be training yourself to make the same mistakes time and time again until it becomes second nature. But now imagine that you're working smart. You take your sketchbook, you're going to draw hands. You pull up good reference and you look at it carefully. You try to understand the forms. Then you copy that reference very carefully. The next step would be to take the reference away and attempt to draw it from imagination. Then you analyze the drawing that you just did carefully against the reference. You try to understand where you're going wrong. You look at the distances, the proportions, the gesture, and the perspective. You take notes about where you're failing, and then you draw another hand. But this time, you look at your notes and you make sure that you don't fall into the same trap twice. The goal here is not to do a lot of drawings. It's to ensure that each drawing you do is addressing an issue, is solving a problem, that every drawing has a purpose. It's studying, just like you would study in school or university. You have to test yourself. You have to treat it in an academic way. But even if you do, you're going to hit plateaus. You're going to reach a point where you feel like you're not improving, no matter how much work you put in. And the way that I've managed to deal with this over the years is quite simple. Try something else. For example, if you've been working in a sketchbook or digitally just for a year now, just doing the same process again and again and again, you may be reaching the limits of what that process has to teach you at that time. It could be important to pick up some paints or maybe some charcoal. Maybe you want to go to figure drawing classes. Maybe you want to try plein air painting. There are so many things that you need to learn, and the only way you can learn all of them is to try everything. Painting digitally is a great way for you to experiment with lots of different colors, lots of different processes. You can jump right in and not fear mistakes, because you can just draw things on a different layer and remove it completely if you don't like it. You can alter the colors, you can alter the values, you can endlessly modify what you've done, so there's no fear of failure. But once you've learned all you can from that, you may have developed a lot of bad habits. It's time to grab the paints, because when you're using oil paint or acrylic, it's much harder to fix your mistakes, and so suddenly your brain is forced into a different way of thinking about the process. You're thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, which is something you never really need to do with digital. Every medium has its own strengths and weaknesses, its own limitations and freedoms. It's really important to put yourself into a position of thinking about the process from a different angle. It not only keeps you entertained and interested in the process, but it forces you to fill in blank spots in your understanding of the artistic process as a whole. And these gaps in your understanding are the focus of my next tip, which is that thing that you really don't want to do, the thing that feels hard, is the thing that you most need to do. We all want to succeed every time we put that pencil down on the paper. We want every brush stroke to add to the painting. We want every piece of art we finish to be a step forward. But that's just unrealistic. And at least for me, it's actually undesirable. Because that feeling of failure is so important to an artist. It's a compass. It directs you where you need to devote your attention. It shows you where your weaknesses are. And it ensures that there is always a goal somewhere ahead that you haven't yet achieved. Now, this point dovetails perfectly with the next piece of advice, which is self-evaluation. You need to look at your artwork with a really critical eye. You need to be honest and figure out where your weaknesses are and what you're hiding from. I'll give you an example from my own self-evaluation. I realized at some point after looking through my sketchbook that I had a tendency to draw faces and maybe the bust, the shoulders and the torso. And they would look pretty good. But if I ever tried to continue drawing the character down and have them standing on a plane somewhere, they felt unbalanced. The perspective that they were standing in felt wrong. The feet were in the wrong positions. I could never make them look like they were carrying their own weight. And so, without even realizing it, I simply avoided trying. I filled a bunch of sketchbooks. I did so many drawings, but I was never really addressing the elephant in the room, the thing that I was failing to address, the thing that I didn't want to do, the thing that I couldn't do. And guess what? Avoiding the problem just made the problem persist. I never got better. Until I really started to think about it, I started to evaluate my work honestly. I accepted the fact that I was avoiding my weaknesses, that I was looking for success all the time rather than embracing the failure. And it's a hard thing to do, but it makes the whole process so much more rewarding when you do start addressing these weaknesses, because it breaks down barriers faster than just about anything else. It's better than hard work. It's focused attention on your weaknesses. And the more that you do it, the fewer weaknesses you have, and that allows you to explore your imagination with fewer limits. You'll no longer have to discard an idea because it feels too ambitious, too hard. Everything will be within your grasp in time if you focus on your weaknesses. But what if you're just starting out? I've been there, we've all been there. Everything is your weakness. It can feel overwhelming. With such a huge task ahead of you, it can be difficult to know where to look. There is no correct place to start, and there is no piece of advice that's going to make this easy. The best thing you can do when faced with an enormous task is to simply break it down into a bunch of smaller, more manageable tasks. Perspective, anatomy, composition, lighting, forms, values, there's so many things to focus on. And inside those things, there are many sub-disciplines that you need to focus on. Just break the problems down into manageable packages. If you're trying to learn anatomy, just break the body down. Today, draw a page of hands. Tomorrow, a page of arms. The day after, legs, knees, feet, faces. After you've been doing it for about a year, you'll find that you've pretty much covered everything. You've worked your way slowly over the entire human body because you were persistent. And that is the last piece of advice. Just don't quit. You can have these periods of intense inspiration where you'll fill 30, 40 pages in your sketchbook in a matter of days. But those things never last. And if you rely upon being inspired to get work done, well, it's going to be inconsistent to say the least. Far better to have patience. I can tell you with absolute certainty that the one thing that all of your favorite artists have in common is that they don't quit. They never gave up. They just kept working. And there may be 1,000 more talented artists out there who are just natural at drawing. They pick up a pencil and it all comes easy. But that doesn't mean they're going to be the best artist. A seed has all the potential in the world to become a large, healthy tree. But if it doesn't get enough water, soil and sunlight, it'll remain a seed, or it'll become a stunted tree. If you want it to grow and reach its full potential, you need to give it constant care. You can't just water the tree once every couple of weeks really well, or put it in the sun just for a few hours every now and then. You need to return to the tree and give it the care it deserves on a regular basis. And you need to do that for years and years and years. And if you do, you will be rewarded because that tree will grow. You will improve over time if you create the correct conditions for growth. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. And if you did, why not drop a comment down below, like, subscribe, and share the video with your friends. Those are the conditions that this little seed of a YouTube channel needs to grow. And I would really appreciate it if you guys could help me create those conditions, because I can't do it without you. And with that, I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you in the next video.